So yeah, this is the sort of always a kind of graveyard slot in the ION agenda, which gets moved around at the whims of the other speakers. Plus, it expands and contracts to fill the time available, depending on whether we're running late on the agenda. So, but I think obviously in this audience, yeah, I think you're pretty familiar with the IETF. So I'm not going to go through all the slides, and we're running behind a bit of time. I just have to spin this out long enough for the next speaker to send their slides, so bear with me if I'm telling you stuff you already know. Okay, so one of the reasons we do this is actually because, as you're probably aware, the Internet Society is the organisational home of the IETF. We provide some organisational support and some financial support. And you know, one of the missions, as Megan was saying at the very beginning of this workshop, of the Deploy 360 program is actually to be that bridge between the IETF standards making process and actual deployment. So we always talk a little bit about, you know, what the IETF is and some of the groups that we sort of focus on and maybe support to some extent. So I'm not talking on behalf of the IETF because, as you know, nobody really speaks for the IETF, so I'm just talking about the IETF as an individual participant, as we all do. Yeah, and of course the mission of the IETF, it's to make the internet work better by producing the technical documentation, but also, you know, provide some input and guidance as to how the internet gets designed and managed. So yeah, this has been running since 1986, and it's this large open community of engineers and operators and vendors, researchers who work in the development, work on development matters. Primarily volunteers who participate on an individual basis to develop the protocols. Although in many cases they are actually supported by their employers. But the aim is to produce the open standards. It's an open standards process, which these come out at the end as requests for comments. Obviously, these standards make the internet work, and I actually would point out many of these are also have been experimental standards, so it may have escaped people's attention, but quite recently IPv6 was only just recently made a formal standard of the IETF. Up to that point it was only an experimental standard, so some cases are not actually formal standards that are well-known protocols, but these are obviously some of the more common ones, and some of the newer ones are things like DANE, for example, and DNSSEC. Well, actually DNSSEC's not that new, it's probably getting on for 20 years old now, but it feels new. Okay, so the point is that anyone can participate in the IETF process. You can do this through the mailing lists, you can follow online on the website through webinars, all the meetings are streamed. And it's also possible to submit ideas and potential standards through Internet-Drafts, also known as IDs. These get discussed in the working groups, and if there's sufficient consensus, these will progress through the standards process, perhaps ultimately to become an RFC. Many do not, but that's ultimately how the standards get produced. So obviously there's different working groups, depending, some of them are focusing on very specific areas, some are focusing on much broader areas, some have been going for a very long time, some have a very short lifetime. They're there to do specific pieces of work and wound up. But there are about, well, last count 134, and that was actually verified by Fred Baker the other day. He counted 134 as well, so it's good that there's two people counting and getting the same number. But yeah, they usually have 2 or 3 chairs each that share, co-chairs that share the work. And there is usually a specific purpose and a charter and a focus, specific deliverables and a defined time frame most of the time. But as I mentioned, there are some working groups that are very long running. But these themselves are organised into 7 different areas, which are led by an area director, and they're quite important in determining which drafts may make it to standards, to an RFC standard. So those are the 7 areas, covering a whole sort of variety of things, applications, routing, the internet. So things like IPv4 and IPv6, DNS fall under the internet area. TLS, where would that fit? That would probably fit under applications, I guess. 7 areas. And there's sort of a quite interesting distribution between the number of working groups in each area. The applications is quite clearly the area with the most work, and I would say probably the area where there's most sort of groups appear and disappear in the IETF process. But then of course there's only the one in the general area, just the IETF group. So yeah, these are held 3 times a year. They move around the world to different locations. But I'm going to come to the point actually about Africa. There's an important point to make about this. So actually the last IETF, so this was attended by about 1,200 participants from around 50 countries. This was held in July. But I think the sort of, well, so 1,200 participants, that's maybe average, maybe even slightly below average. Maybe the ones in the US get slightly more. But of course, as well as the on-site participants, there's a number of remote participants too. But I think the important point to make is there were actually only 6 that we could count from South Africa. So out of 1,200, only 6 from South Africa. There's other events happening, the hackathon and the code sprint. That's held a couple of, usually at the weekend before the IETF, where it brings together people to sit together and discuss and collaborate and actually write some code and test their code together. So really to develop some practical implementations of the IETF standards. But one thing that we do at ISOC is we actually write these rough guides, which we write in advance of the IETF. So what we're trying to do is highlight what's the latest work that's happening, what are the interesting things. So we're quite often focusing on IoT at the moment. That's one of our areas of interest. But we'll also highlight the areas that we focus on at Deploy 360, so IPv6, TLS, DNSSEC. So anything that's sort of happening in these areas, we will tend to highlight. Actually, one area that is quite new for us is DPRIVE, so DNS over TLS, or DTLS as well. And in fact, Jan has been working on that in the Go6 lab. That's his latest project. This has been, actually, there was a test implementation run at the last IETF of DNS over TLS. So this is actually encryption of the queries and responses of the DNS traffic. So the idea is to deter surveillance of this traffic. So actually, only yesterday, I think we posted a blog, Jan's experiments in the Go6 lab. So go to the Deploy 360 website, you can read all about the trials and tribulations he had getting it to work, the experimental version. So the next meeting is in Singapore in November, coming up quite quickly. Then this will actually be the 100th IETF. And as always, there's remote participation for audio streams, web conferencing, and there's a Jabber chat rooms as well. So we encourage you to participate. Okay, so we move on to the some substance now. There's an interesting challenge for Africa regarding the IETF. So there has never been an IETF meeting in Africa for various reasons. One is that the awareness in the region is quite low. There's low attendance from Africa in general. So there was only 6 participants from South Africa, but actually if you look up for the whole continent, it's really, really quite a low number of the total percentage. And And actually, out of more than 8,000 RFCs, we think there's probably only about 20 have been authored by Africans. It's a little bit of a loose definition because it's hard sometimes. There may be some African people may have authored them whilst they're living in America or in another country. So it's quite hard to actually determine this, but it's certainly quite a low percentage, I think it would be fair to say. And then there's sort of relatively limited research about the internet in universities as well. So one of the things that ISOC has been working on is the IETF Africa initiative, and actually this is an initiative of my colleague Kevin Cheggy, who's sitting there at the front, and Michuki as well. So they're the people to talk to about this, so credit to them. I'm just presenting their work. Yeah, and so the aim is really to increase the IETF's visibility in Africa and to promote the use of open standards here. But more specifically, build up a community of individuals who can contribute to the IETF process. So there is a mailing list. There's about 200 participants on that. That's the place to go to subscribe. But actually, more practically, what's been done, we've set up viewing hubs for IETF 99, or we set up viewing hubs for IETF 99. I'm not sure if we're going to be doing this for the next one. I'm guessing we probably are, but I guess Kevin will know. So there were 8 hubs based in 7 countries. And there was also an IETF hackathon that was held in Nairobi back in May. There's some information there on that URL. There were also meetings of the IETF African participants at the last 2 IETFs, 40 participants there. But just more generally, there's some work ongoing to develop some IETF materials that can be used in university curricula. And that's actually, some of that is available on the hackathon website. And then there's 2 webinars coming up, one on vehicle-to-vehicle communication. This is one of the latest IETF developments, plus also the identity-enabled networks. And I'd just like to mention the 2 fellowship programs that we have. So we have some funding available for people to attend IETF meetings. So you can apply and make your case and say, this is the reason I'd like to attend the IETF. This is a really, really horrible URL, and I was hoping with the new website this would actually be better, but it seems it's the same. But these slides will be online, so you can cut and paste to follow that. And then we also have an IETF policy program as well. So these are fellowships that are available for regulators to attend IETF meetings. So the idea is to sort of raise awareness and improve knowledge of actually how the IETF standards making process works. And they have a specific program at the IETF which they can attend. They can talk to some of the working group chairs and understand how this process works. Again, pretty horrible URL, but it's yeah, cut and paste from the slides. Okay, so I'm told now the next presenter is ready, so I will skip over these slides. So this is the last one. Yeah, the IETF plays an important role in the functioning of the internet, and it's an open and inclusive structure. So we do very much want to encourage participation, particularly from Africa, in this organisation. Okay, so that's it. Any questions?
No, there we go. I have a quick question, and it's probably a very simple question with very complex answers. How do we fix the IETF? What do I mean by that? Earlier this year, I was writing our own TACAX server, and I went looking for TACAX RFCs. First TACAX RFC I found back in 1994. The latest TACEX RFC then expired in February 2017, and I see there's now another one that expires sometime in 2018 and was on the 21st of April, and nothing's changed. And I'm seeing protocols that are being used globally by a lot of people, but they're stuck in this mire that is the IETF and not moving. And if you want to know why people like myself and others aren't involving ourselves in the IETF, that's case in point, because when you are seeing something being dragged on for 20 plus years while people are using it, people are advancing beyond it. This is a problem. How do we fix that? How do we make the IETF actually run more smoothly and faster and
A small correction, it's not an RFC, it's an internet draft that is
Okay,
20 years old.
okay, it's a draft that everybody's actually using. That is the problem.
You're setting yourself up. You have to fix it. The IETF is, we all have to work hard at going to IETF. That's what he's telling you. You're setting yourself up, Andrew.
We could, as you well know, Andrew, we could have this discussion all day long, and we would never come to the conclusion. But I will say this, that I think there is a recognition in various circles at the IETF and also at ISOC that there is, what you're saying is an issue, and there are some concerns about it, or a lot of concerns about this. And I think that, it's fair to say, I can't stand here and make promises about this, but I think there is some recognition of the problem, and there may be some steps will get taken to address this. But it's a very big issue. It's a wider issue than we can resolve or debate in this forum. I think the point is well made. I think the point is well understood.
I mean, I'm not trying to trash the IETF.
No.
I'm just highlighting why. Because for a lot of us, it's a vendor playground.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Point well made.